Courtney Nagel, the Associate Marketing Manager for the NFCC, and I'm joined today by our VP of Communications and in-house expert, Bruce McClary. Today, we're going to be covering what the President's executive orders mean for your finances. But first, how are you doing today, Bruce?
I'm doing great. I can't see you around this microphone, so I think it's
yeah, it looks very official.
Too high, but yeah, things are good. It's kind of a busy week. It's a busy time, a lot going on, but getting a chance to enjoy what we have left of summer. Have you been is this the point where you're trying to cram in all of your summer activities before things get back to school and other fall activities?
It's weird because I don't feel like there's anything that we can do that would be normal for this time of year. Like, we haven't planned any vacations because we're not necessarily comfortable going to the beach with crowds and things like that. So it's different in that sense. I do plan to take some time off and maybe have a day at the beach, so it's just limited exposure, but nothing. All of the things are still the same. We still have to go to school supply shopping, but we're setting up desks in our house. So it's like we're doing virtual learning for a while. So it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. And I know there are lots of other parents who are being affected by their kids' schools being closed and trying to set up a new routine for all of the little ones. So right now, we're just focused on organizing the house and getting it prepared for lots of desks.
Right. But the good news about not traveling, and this is really the case with a lot of people right now, if for those who are still employed and fortunate enough to have full-time income and no changes there, the lack of travel and other summer activities has really helped people save a lot. Or on the flip side of that, it's helped people use the extra money they have in their pocket to pay down debt. So, it's kind of good, actually, even though you're not getting a vacation. I mean, that part sucks, but
yeah, right. I'll just have some time off with my kids, which will be nice too, without.
Yeah, I've been I've been in the same boat with vacations. I have, I've been trying as hard as I can to do things locally that seem, vacation-y.
Right.
But there's only so much mileage you can get out of that. I mean, there's really, how many times can you see the same bike trail? How many times can you look at the same river? I'd say I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to think of ways that I can creatively and safely get farther away from town and do some things there. But in my case, I mean, I don't have a lot of family. I don't have anybody. It's just me here. So it's easier to pick up and go without all the logistics. But even so, I feel kind of tethered because of this COVID circumstances. Like, I'm tethered to being close to home and not where I want to stay in a hotel yet. And I certainly don't want to go to the beach. That's just,
Yeah. It's just a weird season. I was like, these are really strange times. Just still wrapping my head around that we're in a pandemic and we're like, I can't really, like, it's not been that different because my schedule's still really busy and we're still doing all of the things except for like the extracurricular activities that my kids were doing. But it feels different, but it's not as different as it may seem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, just little things are different that make it an unusual situation and experience. But I'm sure the kids are excited about going back to school, seeing their friends, et cetera, even if it is virtual.
Yeah, so they are.
Good.
All right. Well, let's jump into the topic. I know everybody's probably wondering what the president's executive orders may mean for their finances, and we're looking to you for all the answers, Bruce. So
the nation turns to Bruce. Well, I'm sorry, nation. I don't have a lot of clear answers, but we'll try to sort it out. I mean, we can work together on this, I think.
All right. Well, where do you want to start?
Let's start with this is something that's been weighing heavily on my mind, and I'd like to start with the eviction protections for renters, because more and more I'm hearing about the worry and the concern and the stress of those who haven't paid rent for months. They're still unemployed and they're confused, and rightfully so, about what's next. I mean, am I going to get evicted? Am I not going to get evicted? And there are all those questions. What can their landlord do and what they can't do? And on the flip side of this, there are the landlords. They're the mom and pop landlords are hurting just as much as their tenants, because in a lot of these cases, they're relying on rental income to put food on their table and to keep a roof over their head. And if they're not getting the rental income, they're in just as bad a situation as their tenants. So it's like everybody is sort of tied together in this.
Yeah.
Or as I said the other day, everybody's tied to the same sinking cinder block. And there's a lot of confusion about what lifelines there are. So with the eviction protection, it's a little bit complicated in terms of the language of the executive order, but it doesn't actually halt evictions. So and if you think about how many people are at risk here, there are some estimates that say about 40 million Americans are at risk of being evicted as a result of eviction protections expiring. So just that it's such a huge number of people that could be out on the street. It's just hard to wrap your head around the impact of that on the economy, on their communities, and more importantly, on their personal financial situation. I mean, that's a huge chunk of the population. That's over 10% of the population.
Right.
So the order, as announced, is about stopping evictions, but because of the way it's set up, it leaves the decision to stop those evictions, to prevent evictions, in the hands of other government departments, which really haven't made clear what they will do. If they will provide financial assistance to renters, or how they're going to deal with that. So it's really murky. It's more. I look at it as more of an expression of intent and not something, at least at this stage, that I see as being actionable. So then you're probably asking, well then what? If there are renters out there, for sure, they're probably asking, well, what about me? What can I do? The protections are still in place. And are being managed on a state by state level. And there are some good recent examples of some states, and I'll use Virginia as an example, who have made announcements that they're extending the protections, the eviction protections that were already in place that were at risk of terming out. But it's because right now it is a state by state situation. You just have to check to see where things stand. Your state may not have extended protections. Your protections may have already expired. In other situations, your state may have gone ahead and extended those protections. And the bigger concern is what happens if the protections expired and your landlord is already taking action to evict you. And then your state comes back and says, well, we're going to go ahead and extend the protections. That's a really tricky situation. And honestly, I don't have any clear answers. But the one thing that helps is if you get all the information you can about how your state is protecting you as a renter. And there are a lot of easy ways you can do that. One website that has a really good grid that's kept fairly up to date is NOLO, N-O-L-O. And they show state by state where things stand with the evictions and how eviction protections and how renters are safeguarded there. And then, of course, keep the line of communication open with your landlord. I know it's tough, especially when you haven't paid, and especially if they're relying a lot on your rent payments to supplement their income. But it's very important to be honest about your circumstances and to keep the line of communication open. So that's where things stand for renters. I'm sorry it's a little murky, but until these government agencies who've been given the direction to enforce and provide these protections, until they add more clarity, there's really not much more I can add there. But equally important to that, I think, is the unemployment benefit, because everybody's been focused on that. And losing that additional $600, if you think about it, for a lot of families, and for any family, I mean, most any family, if you have to start cutting your budget to the tune of $600 a month, That's a tough exercise. And it's impossible in many cases. I mean, already, if somebody's unemployed, they probably cut their budget right down to the bone. And then you're
Right.
taking $600 a month out of the mix, up to $600 a month.
Well, I think it was $600 a week, wasn't
Or
it?
600, yeah, that's right. It was 600 a week.
That's a much bigger number per month.
Yeah. So you move that out of a budget. Yeah. $600 on a weekly basis. That is, it's impossible. I mean, you might as well, ask somebody to tap dance on a high wire. It's easier than pulling $600 out of your budget that way. So the executive order basically offers, at least it announces, that there will be a $400 unemployment benefit. So the federal government would essentially contribute $300 of the $400, which would then be in place of the $600 that was there before. So it is going down from $600 to $400. But the complicating factor here is that the $400 benefit includes a contribution that from the states, or it's relying on a contribution from states. The states are going to have to fill in that extra $100 per person per week, and it's retroactive, so it goes back to August 1. And a lot of the states are pushing back, saying, we're already financially burdened. Now you're asking, the federal government, are asking us to pony up an extra $100 a week for everybody who's receiving the unemployment benefits in our state to accompany your $300. And this is not going to be something that I think is going to be easily resolved in terms of the challenges from the states and where the federal government stands in this executive action. And it even could be challenged legally. Because there are constitutional questions surrounding this type of executive action requiring states to allocate money in a certain way out of their own budget. So, again, this is another situation where it's really murky. We don't know
it's all what's really complicated and how it works out.
Yeah. So if you're impacted and you're not receiving the full benefits that you were receiving before, and you need help making the most out of your money, I mean, the best advice that I can give you right now is reach out and talk to somebody. Maybe there's some help you can get on the budget counseling side. If you talk to a nonprofit credit counseling agency, that session is free, so you can plug in, you can talk to a financial expert who may be able to help you find either a little bit of room in your budget that you didn't know was there, or a lot of these nonprofit credit counseling agencies, especially those in the NFCC network, are well connected with local resources, community and state resources that they can guide you toward. And it saves you all the time and legwork of trying to find out which resource might be most applicable for your situation. They can put it all together for you and help you connect the dots. So at least you have that as a resource in this situation to help you get through a rough patch, because even if there is some way they resolve this disagreement between the states and the federal government on the unemployment benefit, and even if it's retroactive and it goes back to August 1st, that retroactive payment may not do you a lot of good if you've had to live for weeks and weeks and weeks without that additional income you were counting on and other obligations fell behind. So that's the main thing. And especially your debt obligations. That's another reason why you should reach out to a nonprofit credit counseling agency if you haven't done so already. And they can work out a plan to help you keep things on track with your creditors if you do anticipate that you might miss a payment because of this disruption in your unemployment benefits and your income.
Yeah. Another one of the pieces of the executive orders was helping people who are employed and with the payroll tax cuts. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that could mean for people?
Yeah, so this is something that's been discussed for a while, and essentially it's like the idea is a payroll tax holiday. So it helps keep you from it helps defer your federal tax withholding. So it means essentially what it means is it puts more money in each paycheck that you earn. So if you're currently employed and you're paying your payroll taxes as you usually do, the intent of this is to take remove your responsibility, or at least give you a reprieve on your responsibility for having those deductions, and put that money back in your paycheck so you'll have more cash to spend or put in savings or take care of the debt that you owe. And it's a deferral. So it's very important to understand the difference here. This is not tax forgiveness. It is a deferral. So you still have to pay the taxes after the deferral period is over, but without having to pay any additional interest or tax. So there's some fine print there that is important because it covers a 4-month period, September 1 through December 31, and it's for people earning less than $100,000 a year, or less than $4,000 every 2 weeks, and that's pre-tax income. So that's essentially how this works.
Do you know how the catch-up will work? Like if it's deferred, will it end up being a bigger chunk of their paycheck taken later, or like will that work out at tax time?
Yeah, that's it. You have to pay after the deferral period passes, but it's unclear exactly how that's going to work. So that's another area where we're left with some questions. And honestly, it's leading to some confusion as well in terms of, is this even an executive order that stands on its own? In other words, can this be challenged on a constitutional basis? Yeah. That's another question that's floating around. So this is another one of those executive orders. It looks like it could be in jeopardy of being challenged, thus delaying any type of implementation here. Okay.
And I think another piece was around student loans. Did you?
Yeah. So the student loan piece, and actually there was, I talked to somebody about this a couple of days ago, and there's an article out, a story out right now. I think it was a CNBC, I believe, was the reporter that I was talking to, about what's happening here and who this affects. And this is something that is tangible. It looks like it's going to move forward, and it looks like it's going to be an extension for student loan borrowers that have federally backed student loans. And it gives them the ability to benefit from a payment deferral. So it essentially waives, it does two things. It defers payments, and it also continues waiving the interest. And the interest waiver extends until December 31st. So that extends the current program that was set to term out at the end of September. And then payments are not scheduled to restart until January 1. So you're getting, this is a really tremendous benefit, because you're getting a period where interest isn't accruing on your federally backed student loans, and you're not having to make your payments. And then the question comes up, well, if you owe student loans and you're benefiting from this automatic payment deferment, and keep in mind, again, here, this is a deferment. It's not forgiveness. So you still have to make those. You're still on the hook for the money you owe, but you just don't have to make the payments now if you can't. But if you're in a position where you can make the payments, some people have been going ahead and paying anyway. And what that does, and it's certainly worth consideration, because then it gives you the ability to make payments during an interest-free period on your loan, and you can make more progress in paying it down. So you can kind of use this as an opportunity. If your situation is financially stable to the point where you can manage this, you can pile payments onto your student loan and get it paid down faster, and use this to make forward progress. But if you're, one of the millions who are unemployed right now, who are dealing with reduced benefits there, who are at risk of eviction, then you might want to use that that opportunity to skip payments, to focus on how best to allocate the resources you have for the necessities instead. So this is something that really is tangible. It does give people a benefit, and it helps extend that benefit a little bit further into the year, as we see that things are not really improving as much as we had hoped when these were initially implemented.
That's wonderful news for all those people who are have been struggling with their student loan payments.
Yeah, and another point here, though, it does not cover private student loans. So,
Right.
and that was the same before with the CARES Act and the provisions there. The safety net didn't really cover people with private student loans. So in that case, you really do need to work with your loan servicer to talk to your lender. And it can also help to talk to a nonprofit student loan counselor who can walk you through some of those decisions, and you can contact a counselor for students with questions about your student loans at nfcc.org, and they can work with you through those.
Yeah. And if it was a situation where they were struggling to even make their credit card payments, maybe they take the money that they have been paying on their student loan, since it's not required, where they refocus it to a higher interest payment like credit cards. Right. That could be a good strategy to use during the time.
Exactly.
Well.
Exactly. And for people who were unemployed, this was a kind of a double benefit to make the most out of the money that they were getting through their unemployment benefits, and this is why I think a lot of people have really effectively managed paying down their debt during these circumstances, even if they were unemployed and even if they owed student loans, because they had that break on their student loan payments and they got the extra unemployment benefit for a time, and people were able to pile onto the minimum payments to add extra money to those minimum payments and accelerate the payoff of any debt that might have been problematic or sticking around longer than they wanted to. We've seen debt levels come down as a result of that. The problem is these benefits term out and these payment moratoriums end and the unemployment benefits dry up or go away completely. A lot of those people whose situation has not improved, they may have cleared debt off of their credit cards earlier, but those credit cards might be a lifeboat,
right,
in lieu of any other benefits and in lieu of any tangible savings, as they try to stay afloat. And that's the concern. And then you're going to see debt levels spike, and you're going to see people running into trouble making minimum payments, keeping the accounts out of collections, and things are going to get busy in terms of the work of nonprofit credit counseling agencies, which it's good that they're there when and if that happens. Hopefully that never happens, but if it does, nonprofit credit counseling agencies are a tremendous resource for people to avoid the worst of those circumstances and try to stay on track as much as possible.
All right. Well, thanks, Bruce. I think that was all the topics that we were going to cover from the president's orders. But thank you for all your knowledge and
you're welcome.
A little bit more clarity.
I would advise people to stay tuned to whatever news relates to these benefits, especially if you're counting on these benefits. But again, if until things kick in and until you get those retroactive unemployment payments, it's really important to take action now and to reach out and get the help you need and find other ways to get support to stay afloat. Don't just hide away and make your situation and think your situation is going to get better. It's going to get worse unless you do something. So again, I would just urge people, pay attention to the news, stay focused on the developments related to those executive orders, and do what you can to reach out proactively for help during this time while you're waiting on these benefits to kick in, if you're waiting on ones that haven't yet kicked in.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Bruce. We'll be back next week.
All right. Thanks, Courtney. Take care, everybody.